My name's Chris Finney. I'm a producer, engineer, mixer in New Orleans, and I've been running recording studios for just about 35 years or so, one way or another.
And the recording studios, this is audio, video, what is this?
So now it's evolved into video. Really, you know, the long story is that back in the 90s, when video guys would get more than 6 microphones, they'd freak out. Mm-hmm. So we started getting calls for doing music because they had 24 and 32 and 48 microphones. And so I started becoming aware of video stuff along the way, and then kind of got a taste for it, but it was never really my thing. I loved the audio side and specifically music. Mm-hmm. And then during the pandemic, I noticed there was a lot of musicians who didn't know how to make the jump from live performance to live streaming. Yeah. And I looked and I was like, I have all the tools, I have all the resources. Yeah. And so that's kind of when I dove into doing video as much as anything else.
And what was the name of the business and what was your position at the time that they started to kind of branch out, it sounds like?
For during the pandemic, you're saying?
Well, prior to that, you said that the studio you were with started to get calls to come out and accommodate these video sessions because of the number of mics.
That was way back in the day. We were working as freelancers. Myself, a guy named Mike Montero, Mike Mayu. It was being affiliated with House of Blues, mm-hmm. and I learned from a guy named Mike Palopoulos who did a lot of that stuff. And Mike Palopoulos was kind of a wild card genius guy who would like say yes to any job. Okay. And so he would get these. He worked for Cosmo Matassa and Alan Toussaint at C Saint, so he knew the recording world really well, and he would get calls to do these video shows or a radio program or something. And this is in the 90s when that stuff was still pretty primitive. Okay. You needed a full truck worth of equipment to just go out and record.
Gotcha.
And so because he was old school like that, he was connected with the Jazz Fest people. And so one thing kind of led to another, and pretty much any time there was video with audio, one of the mics got the call. Mike Montero, Mike Palopoulos, or Mike Mayu. And I came up under those 3 guys. Gotcha. As their helper, and then through the 2000s, kind of came into my own.
How old are you when you're working under those guys?
Oh, geez, I started way young. I started at 17. Okay. I was always into car stereos and stuff in high school, and so through car stereos you learn about electronics, you learn about crossovers and speakers and amp impedance and stuff like that. And one thing just kind of led to another. I loved playing music and things like that, and then. When I attempted to go to college, Ellis Marsales kind of sat me down and was like, look, you're not really the musician you think you are, but you're really good with microphones. Interesting. And so he kind of set me off of the path of trying to be a musician and set me on the path of worrying about being an audio engineer.
So coming up at that time, what were you playing? During the time when your car stereo interest and things like that?
So, I mean, I loved all kinds of music, and especially for car stereo stuff, it was like I wanted to hear something super clean, or I wanted to hear something with a lot of bass, or, you started learning about distortion and, just the different elements of what could go wrong with a system so that you can get a pure sound. It wasn't always about how do we get it loud or how do we make it boom, although those were a big part of the job.
They were with me, I'm going to tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. But at some point, clarity became like a big part of what I was trying to achieve. And so, like I said, it kind of helped me understand distortion and phase and all the little subtleties to that. Mm-hmm. And so that those kinds of things, I don't know, I was just really excited about that stuff, and started doing like drama club at school, and they put me on the audio side of things when I wasn't good enough to be on stage, which I guess is a theme to my life. But I kind of started to realize, I see this mixing board works this way. I'm combining a bunch of different microphones and things like that. So I kind of had a good head start with those 2 things. And growing up in Metairie, I went to Rummel, so a lot of heavy metal. Mm-hmm. And a lot of guys playing heavy metal, and I had started playing piano when I was a kid and guitar, and when I got to high school everybody was starting a band, and my dad kind of pointed me to the fact that not everybody was playing bass, and there was a lot of bands but not a lot of bass players, and he's like, might be an
How
opportunity.
did he tap into the high school?
Well,
like, how was his ear to the street there?
I think he was just paying attention. He's just being a dad, you're kind of into your kid's business a little bit. And
so did you take the cue?
I did, and it was instant for me. It was like, this is the instrument I've been trying to play. And there's a great history of recording engineers that come from being bass players, because bass is kind of one of the more important elements.
It's a foundational instrument, really. Yeah, and you didn't include drums in that. You said guitar and keys early on. So
I learned drums later on, like by senior year of high school.
Because it's another foundational instrument as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you're 17, you're just raging, so you want to beat things, So that was just one more thing I picked up, and I realized I really love this stuff. I may not be great at it, but I love it.
Yeah.
And, you get a little bit of that rhetoric about, do the thing you love. And my folks were really brave enough to let me explore that and to dive in. We didn't really come from a big musical background. A few musicians here and there in the family, but nothing approached professional.
Were they at least audiophiles, your parents?
My dad, man, they both love music. My folks still to this day both love music. My mom has a deep emotional connection to music. Like, you can put on Bring It On Home to Me by Sam Cooke, and she goes to another place. Mm-hmm. My dad was like, the app Shazam that you can press a button and it tells you who recorded it, when it was done.
Fantastic.
That was my dad before Shazam existed.
Okay.
So my dad could listen to the radio and be like, 1967.
Get out.
And I realize now as I've grown up, it was probably a byproduct of him being there when that stuff came out and him just being into music. And he kind of has this mental recollection of what was what.
Yeah.
But he was like an encyclopedia, and he loved, this guy's connected to this and this guy's connected to this. And so that part of it I got from him for sure. That kind of encyclopedic, approach to like, oh man, this name keeps appearing on all these records.
Right.
There's something going on here.
Yeah.
And so that's in that regard, they were music they really appreciated music in that way.
I got to ask, did you find a happy medium in between, like being able to rage and not being made to make any distortion? Is that even possible? I kind of synonymous,
a little bit. Because it was like loud and clarity. I started to find, not to get too esoteric about it, but there was like a transcendence. It was like a place that your brain would go to if you could get something really loud and really clean.
Yeah.
And it was different than the visceral kind of like Blue Angels flying over in your chest kind of vibe.
And is this early 90s?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I graduated high school in 92.
So what was your opinion of grunge music? Because that was just distortion and rough around the edges was a characteristic.
It definitely. And I loved it. Our band played Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You couldn't have been alive in those days without having. You couldn't be. I'll start that over. Let me just make sure this is off. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I should have done that first. But yeah, no, you couldn't be alive in the early days of grunge without being affected by it. So it's like the first half of my senior year was Van Halen and the kind of hair rock stuff that was left over. And then when we came back from Christmas break, it was Alice in Chains.
The page flipped.
It was overnight almost. And and I remember going to see like the Metallica Black Album came out, and that was a great example of what you're talking about, where it's like this rage, but it's so pure, it's so well recorded.
Yeah.
And I loved the sound of that record. I loved everything about that record.
You couldn't have had the age of shredding without clarity. Do you know?
True. It's true.
And it really did.
Pantera
It's funny how you describe it. You came back from Christmas break, because it really was like
it was overnight.
It was, and it wasn't just. It's funny because if you ask someone to parse out grunge and alternative, it kind of popped off at the same time, because grunge kind of earmarked the beginning of an alternative to the rock of the present day. Do you know what I'm saying?
Totally.
At least in my mind, my opinion. And it was really, that was a characteristic of it. It was super rough around the edges.
Yeah.
And it got rid of that that hairspray aesthetic that
That's right.
I think some people were kind of sick of.
I think you gotta put it all moves in cycles. And here's the weird thing though, is like at the same time, it was latent. I think, at least in me, if not everybody, because there was this semi-goth thing that was kind of under the surface that was like appealing, and like still in the heyday of hair metal before the grunge thing happened.
Sure,
I always loved the Smiths or. 9 Inch Nails was one of my favorite. When that record came out, I was like a junior in high school, and I was the only one I knew who listened to it. There was like one weird skateboard dude who knew it, and I turned him on to 9 Inch Nails, and he turned me on to Primus.
Okay,
and that was like our secret.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Because it wasn't mainstream yet.
Yeah.
And then by the time senior year came around, everybody was onto Pretty Hate Machine, and that. But it was that same kind of thing, that kind of intensity with precision, and it just appealed to me. And there was an emotional component to like the Smiths or the Cure. Or Depeche Mode.
If I had to cite a European invasion of our generation, it would be that. And it's funny because I started thinking while you're talking about this, point. I'm like, I remember Front 242 on cassette. And that was like a predecessor to 9 Inch Nails.
Totally,
chronologically.
Yep.
Yeah, and those were things that I don't even know how I came about them, because we're talking about a time when you couldn't just surf the web.
Totally. You know what did it for me is on WTUL, they had, I think they called it the industrial alternative or an industrial thing.
Nice.
And I'd tune into that every week or whatever. And that turned me on to a lot of stuff, Shriekback and, a lot of those kind of, KMFDM and the harder edged. And I think that might have been where I first heard 9 Inch Nails.
Okay.
And then there may have been a girl involved too. But like, it was that kind of like, whoa, this is, and none of my friends were into it. They were all Van Halen.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That's still my holy grail is Van Halen. That's my favorite band of all time.
It's a different flavor for sure.
But it's a totally different thing.
So were you seeing an assimilation between what you were listening to and perhaps the possibilities of what you were doing under the tutelage of the people at the studio? Because they were from a different generation and you weren't involved in any of that.
Yeah, a little
kind
bit.
Of music.
I mean, that stuff connected me to New Orleans.
Sure.
And that gave me, it was like, I used to kind of have this kind of existential thing like, man, why? What am I supposed to do with my life? Why was I born in New Orleans? Like, there's a thing about New Orleans that doesn't exist anywhere else. We are one of one.
Sure.
And when you kind of come to grips with that, you start to look at yourself in the big picture. It's like, man, it'd be like a movie star born in L.A. or there's something. If there's a reason to this all, what's the reason I was put in New Orleans? And growing up, my dad used to take us to go see the Mardi Gras Indians, but from blocks away, and there was a mystery to it or whatever. And then going under the bridge to hear the marching bands go under the bridge, that was a really cool thing too. But there was a intensity to hearing the music or the intensity of a Mardi Gras parade, and all these things kind of mixed in, and it was like there's something here that doesn't exist anywhere else. And I think I was pretty well into high school before I realized that it didn't happen everywhere.
Okay.
And so those kinds of things kind of made me question, like, what am I supposed to be doing if I have this connection to New Orleans? And those guys like Palopoulos, they came up with Alan Toussaint and with, Roberta Grace and all these heavies that recorded the meters. And, so I started kind of digging into that stuff. And of course, my dad was an encyclopedia, so I could ask him about, hey, Dad, what about this song? He's like, oh, that was Chris Kenner. It's like, you never heard of Chris Kenner unless you had a connection to it and, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of, all these rivers are kind of flowing together at the same time for me.
It, I'm sure, instilled in you a sense of purpose early on. It's funny that you say that you were pairing the question, why was I born here, with why am I here at all, or why was I born at all?
Yeah,
because most people are like, what's my purpose in life? And they're at a crossroads between suicide and superstardom, and they don't know which one. Like, they could just as easily take one as the other. But you're like, no, why am I here in New Orleans?
I got something to do from here.
My purpose is here.
Yeah, it kind of felt that way, and you know, like, even after Katrina, when I thought about moving to LA or something like that, I was like, nah, this is where I am, and if I'm gonna rebuild something, because moving to LA, I basically would have been starting over.
Yeah.
And so it was like, if I'm gonna be starting over one way or another, I'm gonna do it in New Orleans. And so I've just always had this love for New Orleans.
Sure.
You know.
Working at, you said it was a freelance studio. It didn't really have a name?
Well, so I worked for these guys as freelancers, but the studio I was most affiliated with in those days was Greg Troyer's Side One studio.
Okay.
And Greg did a lot of, I was playing in a band, and Greg had gone to high school with, Greg recorded all the high school guys. He was a Jesuit kid, maybe a year older than me, and he recorded all of our friends. He had a band, a cover band. They were called Overload. Forgive me if that's not the name of it, but they played every prom. They were a great band. They played Journey note for note, and it was like, who can do that? You know, Greg was this virtuoso guitar player and a beautiful guy, and was really into recording. He had this recording setup in his house and his garage, and complicit parents as well. And he got big enough that he could set up his own place. And so I went with some friends I was playing with to go see the new place in Metairie. It was like Athenia by the mall, basically. And we went to go see the place as he's building it. And I kind of fell in love in that moment. Like, forget everything else. This is cool, man. I really want to be here. So in that moment, I turned to him and I was like, this is what I want to do. Where do I start?
And you're talking about the installation and operation of a studio.
Operation of the studio. I just saw, it was like, I loved live performance and stuff like that, but I loved the technology. I love the acoustics. I love the thought that moving a microphone 8 inches could change the sound of it.
Yeah, that does blow my mind too. I love stuff like that. So at what point does the conversation with Ellis Marsales occur? Because at that point you were still holding an instrument.
Right around then, I graduated high school.
Okay.
So this is all happening right about the same time,
Gotcha.
Senior year. And this is that summer maybe, I started working for Greg, helping out around the studio and really learning the difference between an SM57 and a U87, you know, and doing that stuff. And then I hadn't really thought about going to college until too late. It just wasn't on my radar, you know, like my mom had gone back to school to go to college. My dad didn't go to college. So it wasn't like a thing in my family.
Gotcha.
Aunts and uncles all went to college, but like it wasn't, for me, it wasn't like a major driver. And so I kind of started thinking about college a little too late. So I tried to get into Tulane. They're like, yeah, no. And I couldn't have afforded to go there. And then Loyola, I was like, oh, I was an altar boy. How's about Loyola? And they're like, yeah, no. And I couldn't have afforded to go there either. And then it was like UNO. And my mom was doing like night school at UNO. And I knew it was a good school. And I knew it was easy enough to get to and, you know, get through. And I had a few friends going there in Delgado. And so I just, for some reason, Delgado didn't appeal to me. So it was like, all right, I'll check out UNO. And I had a buddy who said, man, you know, they'll pay for your tuition if you do work study. And I said, really, what's the work study? And he shows me the list, and one of them is doing sound and stage services, they call it. And I was like, well, shit, I know how to do sound. Let me sign up for sound and stage services.
What was your level of experience at that point? Because
little to none.
Okay. But you're like,
I knew how to plug in a microphone and make it loud.
There, right?
Yeah,
okay.
But like I said, I kind of explored it, and I wanted to know more.
Sure.
So I probably had, you know, a lot more information working behind me, especially coming from electronics. I always dabbled in electronics since I was a kid, and the car stereo stuff. So I probably had a little more momentum than just somebody who's like, I know how to plug in a microphone,
right.
You know. And so I went to UNO and I did sound and stage services, and that's how I got connected with Ellis and those guys. Is because every Wednesday night they would do jazz at the Sandbar.
Okay.
And that was a major job for the sound and stage services. And once you proved that you could do it, you'd go out, set up the PA, and it was all these heavy jazz players every Wednesday night. It was like Johnny Budakovich and, you know, Ellis. And one night, Don't Worry, Be Happy. What was it? Bobby McFerrin shows up, and it's like all these very heavy jazz players, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of this reward of like being in that right place at that right time. You'd see this magical music happen. It was just incredible, and this improvisation and in the moment, and that was kind of when I started to get a sense of like, I should be transparent to this. It's not about me. It's about making sure what they're doing translates to the audience.
Okay.
And that kind of became a fundamental thing for me. And
did that make it any easier for you?
a little bit, yeah, in the sense that I didn't.
You could kind of step out of your own way, I guess, or step away from having to make so many decisions about the future of your life.
yeah, that's true. Well, that's ultimately my conversation with Ellis took all that off my shoulders, because I went to go talk to him about getting into the jazz studies program, and he was like, "Dude, you get up to play." I mean, he didn't say it like this, but he was like, "You get up to play," and we all go, "Oh boy, here comes Metairie Metal trying to play jazz," And I was like, "Oh God,
thank you and shame on you,
exactly,
Ellis."
yeah. So in that moment, he kind of broke my heart. He was kind of like, "Look, you're not the musician you think you are."
Yeah.
He said, "But your prowess," his words were exactly, I can still hear it. He said, "Your prowess with a microphone is on par with your best colleagues in their instruments."
When you buy one of these boards, the money goes towards promotional efforts donated to independent bands in Louisiana. Support the scene.
And so it was like, whoa. And so he's like, maybe your career is not as a musician, yet in music.
Yeah.
And so that kind of freed me up. And so that was like basically after my first semester of college. And I had been helping out, that band Cowboy Mouth had just gotten together.
Okay.
And my buddy Mike Mayhew was their sound guy. Mike had to come off the road because he had a medical issue. And he said, "Do you want to take my job?"
At what point is this?
This was, I just turned 18.
Jeez.
So this was right after my first semester of college. I dropped out of college at Christmas. I didn't come back. And at the Christmas show, the guys in the band said, "Hey, Mikey says you might want to come on the road." And I was like,
okay,
I'm in.
but you've just finished telling me that you had minimal experience.
I knew how to do sound. I knew how to rock a crowd with a band.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You get, there were things. There was Jimmy's, that club Jimmy's, that summer between graduating and starting college.
Uh-huh.
There was a sound guy there, Mel Wally, who would let us do sound. And my band would play there, and so I got to be friends with him and stuff like that. And after our band would play, I'd go sit with him and hang out. And,
Yeah.
I don't know how much you talk about extracurricular activities on this, but there was some extracurricular activities, and Mel was happy to trade. You do sound, I'll give you a bag of weed.
Sure.
Whatever. And it was like,
Yeah.
and so I was basically doing sound for weed for, that summer or whatever.
Yeah.
And,
Well, you were a sponge, huh? You were coming up quick.
I was coming up quick. And Jimmy's was kind of still a nexus of rock bands
Absolutely.
in that era.
Absolutely.
This would have been 92, summer of 92.
Yeah.
And so I had some chops, you know what I mean? And so January 93, I dropped out of school and I went on the road with Cowboy Mouth.
That is something, dude.
It was wild.
Yeah.
It was wild. I have fond memories of those days, but I also wish I would have been a little bit more mature with some of the situations I was put in.
I think if anybody has any respect for their lives, they all feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly.
I'm not hard on myself, but there were things I could have done better.
It's not a regret, but it's near.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you have any sort of introspective thought in your life or consideration for what you've done or been through, or where you might go from here on, you know, I mean that's what gives you, I guess, a more cautious step in the future. Is reflection on your past. It's commendable, dude. So you get through. So you go with Cowboy Mouth. What are they in the midst of at that time? Like, how big of a tour are we talking about, and where?
They were
to?
just starting out. So they had just moved from a van to like a an airport shuttle that had the seats taken out with beds put in.
Yeah.
So I had the wheelchair lift in the back to put the equipment in.
Sweet.
So the back third was equipment.
Yeah.
Then it was, 2 sets of bunk beds on either side of the aisle. Then like a little card table and a chair, and then the seats, and then the driver.
Yeah.
And that was it. And so it was me, a tour manager, and the 4 band guys all hopped in. And so I handled all the production. The tour manager handled all the logistics. And the band, they were just getting to that point where they could enjoy just being a band. And I got to see them write songs on the road and, playing cards and,
See, that's a next step for me in all of this. I want to be a fly on the wall during the creative process just to experience it because I'm a super fan of music and I have an unbelievable amount of respect for musicians, but also to figure out how it could be portrayed, I guess, respectfully, but also at the same time with enough momentum or progress to keep the viewer interested because it's not easy.
Totally.
People have no patience.
Well, and there's a bit of a sacred thing to the act of songwriting that you don't want to interfere with.
Right.
It's like, watching birds or something. You can't sneak up on them, they'll fly away.
Yeah.
And so I've always been fascinated with the ability to write a song. To me, that is black magic, especially because I can't do it. I write a song and, you hear the stories about Ringo bringing a song to the Beatles and they're like, oh, congratulations, you just wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb or something. And that's how I always felt when I wrote a song. It was like, this is terrible or it's already something.
You know what though,
it's just
man?
not what I can do.
I don't feel like it's up to you. Like that's not your call to make. We are our own worst critic, and that's a saying for a reason.
Yeah.
And we can't be left to make judgments on ourselves because it's biased.
Yeah.
Just from its existence,
Yeah.
If your Mary Had a Little Lamb inspires someone to write Hey Jude, then you were the genesis for a miracle.
Yeah, you did your part.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you can't really. So keep on writing, my buddy. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to be an Ellis Marsales to you.
I'm not going to give up. But I'm not putting them out there like I once thought I might.
But so how did the first show go with Cowboy Mouth? Was it rough or great?
Nope, crushed it.
Great.
I had great run with those guys all the way through because I was raging. I was, and they had that energy. I finally found a place where I could put that kind of energy and manifest that from myself to help them communicate what they were doing. And I don't know if you remember them in those days. And it's an amazing show today. But that original core group of 4 guys was once in a lifetime kind of like, and the performances were like religious experiences. Fred would take it to another level. And, Griff was a bona fide rock star from his previous incarnations. And Paul is just a master songwriter. And Steve was already well versed in punk. He's kind of a punk legend he was in the Normals and so you put those 4 dudes together in those days and they had that kind of camaraderie but all trying to outdo each other at the same time.
Sure.
It was I can't say enough. Yeah, and you knew like you'd see a show and you'd see the audience laid to waste and it was just like this is real. This is the real shit. And I thought let me backtrack and tell you a little story that led to me committing to Cowboy Mouth. Right around Christmas of when I dropped out of college, we went to go see this kind of now legendary show. It was Ozzy, Alice in Chains, and Sepultura.
Oh wow!
At the Lakefront Arena. So all of our friends, we loved Alice, so we were going to go see Alice in Chains. And it was when Lane was on the crutches and he had the broken leg. So right in that moment. And Sepultura comes out, and they were just what you'd expect. Full-blown
melting
prime.
faces.
Yeah. And then Alice came out and was like, this is what we're here for. And, of course, who doesn't love Ozzy? You're halfway to dead if you don't love Ozzy. And between the Alice in Chains show and the Ozzy show, the lights come up, and everybody's switching over. And our seats were right behind the soundboard. And it may have been somebody like, Big Mick or some kind of legendary live sound guy was doing sound for Ozzy. I don't remember exactly. But he comes in and he starts setting up and getting ready for his show. And I lean over the railing. I said, hey, man, how do I get your job? And he turns to me. He turns around over his shoulder. He goes, you're never going to get my fucking job. He said, but if you want a job like this, go work for the best band in your city and ride them to the top. So that was in my head when Cowboy Mouth asked me, would I go on the road with them?
Gotcha.
And so for my money, Cowboy Mouth was the best band in the city.
It wasn't, I guess my question wasn't directed towards why would you do it because of your level of experience at that time. You were a novice, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It was more to the notion that what made you think that you would do them justice or have, it was a cavalier decision at that moment. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess so. But at the same time, when you're, 18, 19 years old, you're ready to take a bite out of the world.
Yeah, you'll jump. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you get that feedback, that positive feedback of like the band comes off the stage and like, dude, that was we felt great. We didn't have to worry about the microphones.
Good.
We saw the audience was rocked.
Yeah.
You did your job. You felt that kind of positive feedback. And then there were things like the Hootie and the Blowfish guys. We would open for them in Charlotte, and or Charleston, and they would open for us at Tips. Mm-hmm. And then one day it flipped, and we always opened for them, and then they started having a tour bus, and then they started flying, but like for those guys to still have the respect they had for Cowboy Mouth was reinforcing. It was like,
gotcha.
You know what I mean? Somebody on that level still thinks Cowboy Mouth is an amazing band.
Sure.
Did
you understand at that time what mixing can do for or against, so to speak, a band?
Oh, for sure. And that's ultimately, towards the end of my tenure with Cowboy Mouth, I was probably a little bit burned out. Like I said, I didn't know how to handle what I had. The band was going through some internal tensions that ultimately manifested. And it just, it was like, I think it was just a little bit more than a year. So it would have been like early 94. Mm-hmm. I did a show in Dallas, and I hadn't properly advanced the show, and I didn't make sure I had everything I needed, and I just was kind of cavalier about, I'll make it work. Yeah. And it was a disaster. And the band wasn't happy with me. I wasn't happy with me. The crowd wasn't, whatever, Yeah. But it made me realize, like, I have to stay on my game. Yeah. I always have to bring my A game. I always have to do my best. And I can't just phone this shit in. Yeah. And so it was, but by that time, a lot of water had flown under the bridge, and, the tour manager was a little bit of a rough relationship with me. I still love the band, but the tour manager and I weren't really seeing eye to eye. And so I left. And it's one of those classic situations of like, I quit, they fired me. Who knows?
Right. Who knows? You tell it like you want to because you're on this camera. So that's what's going down in the annals of history as far as NewOrleansmusicians.com goes. Did you
hear that, boy?
Yeah. So before you did that first show, did you discuss with them how they wanted to sound? There's this thing that's always hovering in my mind. I was watching a documentary about Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and I don't remember if it was their first or second album, but they got it mixed by a big name audio engineer, and they were so unhappy with the way it came out because it was too polished, and they didn't want that, I guess, impression of themselves to spread. Yeah, they wanted some warmth to it, if you will. Yeah, they wanted a more, So it was a problem, and so much to where that they had to get it remixed. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't publish it like that. It was a big deal. So coming into it, you can be just as eager and ambitious as you want to be, but not knowing the scope of what your mission is. Like, you're supposed to come turn knobs and all of this crap, but when it comes down to it, how do they really want to sound? I mean, was there any of that discussion in the beginning?
For me, with them, it was having been a fan and having been at shows from the Dash Rip Rock days, as Dash Rip Rock turned into Cowboy Mouth via Fred, been in the front row with my head in Fred's bass drum, because Fred sets up downstage.
Gotcha.
And having been at shows just right there at the fucking eye of the storm. Sure. I knew where it was supposed to be, and they knew that. And then on top of that, my friendship with Mike Mayu, being in the booth with him on their shows, you just kind of, I get it. It was like the torch was passed. I know where they're trying to come from. And that's why I was saying, like, on that first gig, we were in Atlanta, And it was actually the first time I saw snow. we were
How old are you at this point?
Let's see, I was 18.
Everybody north of the Mason-Dixon's like, I don't know if they're jealous or just jaw dropped, but either way, shocker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the band was really kind. They pulled over to let me play with the snow.
Get the fuck out of here. That's hilarious. Dude, I'll tell you, when I went to Colorado, I was fresh out of high school, I believe. I went to Colorado, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I went around Halloween or right after Halloween, and I went to a Target, bought a dish, and just drove wherever up was. Because I was just like dumb. I was like a stupid kid. I was like, you know. And so, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. Even out of high school, you're just crazy about it. It's hilarious.
Yeah, well, and the irony of that is that was like foreshadowing, because the next year we were playing Telluride and we got snowed in, and like I'm learning how to put snow chains on the car and on the minibus.
How'd you feel about snow then?
That was a very different relationship.
Very different.
Yeah, it was a funny. You know, the band has a funny story. They still tease me about. You know, I don't even remember the context, but it was like we're all driving and everybody's on the edge of their seat, and I was like, avalanche, you know, and everybody, it kind of broke the moment, but they still tease me about it, you know, so it's like, it kind of came full circle, like,
yeah,
here's this kid playing in snow, too, yeah. You know?
Surprised they didn't pull over to rub your face in it at that point, you know.
Definitely that kind of,
yeah.
You know.
So you come off the road because you quit, and what do you do? Where do you go?
So Mike Mayhew. I can't say enough about Mike. He's been a big brother to me my whole life, my whole career. I can't remember when we met. I can't remember how we got to be friends, but he has always been a big brother to me, and I cannot say that enough. And if it's going on record, I will fucking say it. But like, he had been recruited by Chopper Brady, who was kind of a legendary sound guy, Louisiana's LaRue and stuff like that. And they had just opened House of Blues. House of Blues' soft opening was January of 94 to May of 94. And I came in somewhere in between half there.
In what capacity?
As a sound guy.
Okay.
So I was number 2. Chopper was the production manager and the main sound guy. And then he hired Mikey to kind of fill in the gaps. And as they started rolling up to speed, they needed another guy. And Mikey, you know, Chopper called me and said, "You like being on the road?" I said, "Not really. I'm over it." He says, "Do you want to sleep in your own bed every night and make more money?" It's like, "I'm yours. Tell me where to go." And so I got in, you know, they call it the opening team. So it was the first incarnation. And that's when shit went up another level to me. Because I got to be on stage with world-class musicians. The first time I saw B.B. King, the first time I saw Eric Clapton, well, not the first time I saw him, but the first time I was as far from Eric Clapton as you.
Sure.
9 Inch Nails, Johnny Guitar Watson, I mean, Earl King. The list of legends it's embarrassing how many I've forgotten.
Sure.
You know, in those years. And the realization, like the original Neville Brothers, the what remained of the Allman Brothers, and like one of the first 3 government mule shows that ever happened.
Okay.
I was on stage with those 3 guys. You know?
And I got to ask, because you and I were talking off camera, and we spoke about being in the presence of these people and your conduct in the presence of these people. I guess if you would repeat what you said to me out there, because I think it's enlightening. It is, at least to me, because there are super fans of certain people. Everybody's got their top 5, you know, and if they were in the presence of one of those top 5, they would just geek out. Like
it's easy to do. I only got starstruck twice in my life. One was Steven Tyler. Aerosmith came to play a set in the middle of, it was going to be like a secret set, and Chopper comes to me. I was doing front of house. Steady rolling. Bob Margolin was the main act, and he goes, "Look, Bob's going to come off stage about halfway through. The curtain's going to close. Another sound guy's going to come out. Just help him feel comfortable and blah, blah, blah. And then curtain will close. We'll strike those guys, and we'll go back to the show you were doing." I was like, okay, what is all the secrecy about? And within 15 minutes of that conversation, the place is packed. As packed as I've ever seen it. I was like, what the hell is going on here? Curtain opens, and it's Aerosmith. It was like, oh, this is pretty dope. You know, and the sound guy comes in, and he's tweaking the mix and kind of schooling me a little bit on,
nice.
You know, like, it was nice to watch that. I always loved having my ass handed to me on my own system. It happens here. It happened at the Music Shed. It happened at House of Blues. When you get a real pro, somebody who's on that top level to come in a place you work every day and go, did you know your shit can do this?
Yeah.
That was always the best. And that was Aerosmith was one of those. I was like,
okay.
Oh my God, you got this out of my IPA? Like, what is going on here? You know? And so the show ends and everybody's backstage. And it was, hanging out. And I was a fan of Brad Whitford. And so like I wanted to kind of, see those guys and say hello. And then Steven Tyler walks out, and I was just like, blah, 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 blah. But it's moments like that. The other one was Nine Inch Nails when I worked at a computer store, and Trent Reznor came in because his computer was broken, and the other techs in the back were like, "You have to go talk to him," and I was just like, and so it's like you realize, yes, that's a real thing. You can get caught up in the celebrity, but from their vantage point, that's a byproduct of something they have no choice about.
Sure.
And it's like, I don't know, the classic Gen X thing of picking on somebody. A Gen Xer will pick on you about a choice you made, but a Gen Xer will never pick on you about something you have no choice over.
Okay.
And so it's like, a Gen Xer will tease you, oh, you chose to wear those clothes,
Yeah.
But a Gen Xer will never, the Gen X family I grew up in would never make fun of you because your face was different. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, you don't have a choice over that. That's not something that's legal to be messed with. Mm-hmm. And I feel like celebrity is an extension of that. They made a choice to be a celebrity, I guess. But when you have that kind of talent that drives celebrity, you don't have a choice. You are that.
So are you saying that you choose not to address them in that context?
And so at that point you can then approach them from the standpoint that they're just a person.
Yeah.
Who's kind of stuck in an extraordinary circumstance. And they still have the same needs and wants as you. And it's much more enjoyable. I mean, I have this vision in my head. One time I was working on the Princess and the Frog movie with Randy Newman and Dr. John.
Okay.
And I walked out and the two of them are in conversation talking about Metamucil and like just, colon health or whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, there it is. Two 70-year-old dudes talking about how to keep your bowels flowing. Like that's really what celebrity is about, is like the mundane shit. Because, the time they spend on stage is a fraction of the time they spend picking blackberries or just doing something that they enjoy.
Yeah.
So if you can connect with them on that level, that shows that you have a respect for them. And so like what we were talking about
as a person and not as a musician.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And so your instinct is to go, oh, you changed my life. But like you said, how can I convey to you how much your music means to me in 5 seconds?
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
The best thing I can do is give you a knowing nod. Says, right. And then from there, just get on with being people in the same room doing the same thing.
So that makes perfect sense. It's completely logical. So that's what you tell yourself pragmatically, but emotionally, how long does it take you to concentrate when in your periphery is Dr. John or Steven Tyler?
The realization came to me when I was working with Robert Plant, and it was like every now and then, my assistant would be like, dude, Robert Plant, and I'd be like, I can't. I got work to do.
Yeah.
And it was like, it would become real in moments when he'd be singing or something, and he'd go, and you go, holy shit.
Yeah.
That's him.
I remember that.
Yeah. But then you kind of go back to, no, I have a job to do. And further, and a mentor told me this at the time, he was like, no, you're in that room because you have a reason to be in that room. Mm-hmm. For you to feel like an imposter would mean that you feel a doubt in your ability. Why would you not be in the room while you're recording Robert Plant or B.B. King?
Yeah.
You have the same kind of thing. It goes back to the Ellis thing. Like, your skill with your tool is yours, and their skill with their tool is theirs. And for you to make a record, you'll have to work together. So you're not an imposter to be in the same room and working on the same thing. That said, don't get scared of heights.
Yeah.
Concentrate on the work that you have to do.
You don't strike me as someone that's ever been stricken with imposter syndrome. It seems
Oh,
like...
dude. Oh, my God. I'm glad I'm misrepresenting that. Because
Okay. Well,
I am
do tell.
absolutely-
Please, make yourself vulnerable.
It's weird. It's a weird kind of... I can't talk about it without a weird flex. But after I won my first Grammy,
Okay.
I felt like this is weird. I don't... Like, to the point where I had a dream over... This is a crazy story. I won my first Grammy, and my best friend, who I grew up with, not in the music business, he fixes Da Vinci laser machines for hospitals, like,
Okay.
but totally competent dude in his own right.
Sure.
Won the Grammy. Everybody is, oh my God, a Grammy. You know, got the statue and all like that, and my buddy Andrew says, "That's great. Now get to work on the next one." And it was like, fuck, it took me 20 years to get this one. Like,
So you
no.
objected to the notion originally, I guess.
Well, it didn't feel right. It felt like something was being... I felt like at the time this was happening, because it wasn't my Grammy, it was Dr. John's Grammy.
Sure, and you didn't know in that moment if you deserved to be there. But then when your friend tells you get to work on the next one, you step up to defend that achievement. I mean, it's kind of
it was kind of that, but it was also like it was more of a feeling of like I'm kind of at my lowest emotionally in this moment for whatever reason, whatever, a breakup or whatever, smoking too much grass
Something
or
else.
whatever.
Okay.
Something else was. I wasn't in a great headspace to be able to enjoy the beautiful cathedral that I was in. I was sad or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it kind of felt like a disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't become personal until I started having this dream over and over again that I was flying into space on the space shuttle. So like, we're having a conversation, everything's cool, but then I come back to space and I'm in the fucking Apollo tin can and I burn up every time. I wake up in a sweat. And
Okay.
every single time I don't make it home.
Yeah.
And it was like, what the fuck is this? So I went to a therapist and I started seeing a therapist and we talked about this and she did all these things. She was a great lady. And talked about all these things and, unlocked what would make me feel like that. And the culmination of all of our therapy sessions was, well, you should win a second one because then you win. I was like, son of a...
Your boy
My
with the
boy,
laser, yeah.
I could have saved all his months of therapy and figuring that out. But it was kind of right because when the second one came around, and because when the second one happened, I was nominated for 3 records at once.
Oh, wow.
For Taj Mahal's Maestro, for Rebirth Brass Band's Rebirth of New Orleans, and Harry Connick Jr.'s Every Man Should Know. And it was like, well, if I'm going to get a second one, it's going to be because of Harry. If that doesn't work, I'm going to get one because of Taj. So it started to feel like maybe I earned this one.
Okay.
I wasn't just happened to be with Dr. John when that,
Sure.
when my number came up or whatever. And neither of those two won, and Rebirth won. It kind of brought it back to that thing of like, there's a reason I'm from New Orleans. There's a reason I've committed myself to New Orleans. There's a reason it was being under the bridge and hearing that music. I feel like my contribution to that record, I mean, I can't take a fraction of the credit for that. Tracy Freeman, the producer, had a big part. The band themselves was hot, and they were at their prime, or their second stage prime, and everybody involved with that record wanted it to be as good as it possibly could.
Yeah.
And that's what the reward was. That's what the award was that everybody in that room was swinging for the fences.
Yeah.
And the band played with pure fire. And I did my best to make sure that came out of the speakers.
How long were you working at House of Blues? Because that was your first stop after Cowboy Mouth.
Yeah. So House of Blues, I was 2-time in House of Blues. I was basically taking money. House of Blues paid ridiculously well. And for me, it was easy work. Like, we'd finish a show and we would joke, like, let's go get paid. Like, ha ha ha. We'd have paid $100 to be here.
You're what, 19, 20? What are you at?
I was not yet 20. I turned 20 at House of Blues.
Yeah.
And the drinking age was still 18, so it wasn't like, the only time that ever affected me was in Miami when I was with Cowboy Mouth. They wanted everybody in the club to be 21, and I was only 18. And we joked about sneaking me in a road case or whatever, and it never ended up having to be a thing. But
Sure.
that was the only time being that young had anything to bear.
Dude, I've interviewed so many musicians that when they first started out, they had to be dropped off by their parents, go in the back, get up on stage, perform, sneak out the back, get back in the parents' car and go home.
Absolutely. Harry used to talk about that, Harry Connick Jr.
Jr.? Okay.
Yeah, his dad would go bring him, walk him in, he'd go do the gig, and then they'd walk him out. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But House of Blues, so they would pay ridiculously good money, and my closest friend from high school that I was in the band with and everything, his grandfather invented the snowball machine, Ortolano. And George is still a brilliant guy. He's fully in video world now and does amazing work with video stuff. But he was always kind of one of the drivers for like getting me into music and keeping me there. And he had the recording bug as well. He worked at Greg Troyer's with me. And so, we were always kind of side by side, and we were working at side one at Greg's, and it was little things like, there's 100 things here that could be fixed to make this place better. And Greg was like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, let's keep going. It's making money. Let's go. And we were always like, there's a level of esoteric that could happen here. That could, there's a level of finish that could make this place nicer. And maybe we could get more money that way. And Greg was like, I'm not willing to spend money to find out.
Yeah.
And so we decided we were going to start our own studio.
That was all it took?
Pretty much.
Wow.
At that point, we were confident, dare I say cocky enough to think that we could do it on our own.
That was a little cocky.
It was very cocky. We were idiots. And let me tell you about my first bankruptcy. And so,
we got the first and second grade. Let's talk about bankruptcies.
So George was like, hey, my grandmother has this building. It's the building where my grandfather invented the snowball machine. It's right over on Magazine Street. It's been sitting there empty. Nobody's renting it. She just wants somebody in it instead of it sitting empty. Well, I was making money from House of Blues. I was like, all right, well, let's do it. And so George had a little bit of money on his own, and I put in some money, and we built Magazine Sound Recording on Magazine Street. So that was 96.
Okay.
I was 22. George was 23. And we ran that until 2000. And that's where that's when I really decided, no, I want to be in the studio. I don't want to fuck with live sound anymore. And so I stayed at House of Blues until probably 99, 98, 99. So a good 4 or 5 years in there. But towards the end, it was really just to fund building the studio.
Yeah.
And buying some of the vintage gear that I still have came from those days. And at that point, I started getting connected with, we were always friends with the Metal Rose guys, and they became Bag of Donuts, and it was like the Metairie kind of party band scene.
Okay. And
Bobby and Jonathan Herner, great friends, great guys. They grew up with this guy Mike Napolitano. Turns out Mike Napolitano is one of the best recording engineers God has ever minted.
Okay.
He's unbelievable. He could give a fuck. He doesn't care. He's just so aloof. He's so, I guess you call it cool. He's from another planet. Like, he's just, whatever, dude, whatever, and then he'll go and do it, and you're just like, how the fuck did you do that, And so he would come around. He was making a record with that band Squirrel Nut Zippers.
I'm sorry?
Squirrel Nut Zippers.
Okay.
And it was like that kind of classic throwback swing dance thing, but he was getting these vintage sounds and these amazing things, and I was into more modern equipment, and he was like, no, dude, there's a reason this microphone was the best in the world in 1947. Why wouldn't you want to own the best microphone in the world if it's from any time, as compared to owning some crap microphone made in Russia or whatever?
And you're having these conversations at the point in which you are setting up your own studio?
Exactly.
So he kind of gave you insight into right at the right time.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And it really set me on the course, because we set up for analog tape. We were analog tape, and this is before computers were a thing. So, or in the studio at least. It was starting to be. Mike Palopoulos had gotten me into computers for you'd make a record and people needed it on CD. And it took an act of Congress to burn a CD in those days. It was it had to happen overnight.
Yeah.
So we would promise somebody their CD for the end of the next business day. We would burn it overnight, get there in the morning and see if it worked. And if it didn't, we still had 8 hours or whatever to burn another CD before the client was coming in.
Times was hard.
It was hard. It was not the same. And so I was savvy with computers enough to know, but computers hadn't really found their home in the studio.
Okay.
And in fact, the very first time I saw Pro Tools was like 98. Galactic came into my studio, into Magazine Sound to record, and they brought this producer from New York, Nick Sansano, and he had a Pro Tools rig. And he set it up. And I remember the first time I'm like patching it in and trying to connect it to the tape machine. And he goes, okay, we want to do this on channel 13. I go to move it. He's like, no. Click, 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 click. It's on channel 13 now. And I was just like, what?
It didn't take much to dazzle you at that moment.
It was an amazing time. But it was like, that was the realization that, oh shit, this tape machine's going to go away. And we're going to be able to do everything in the computer. Mm-hmm. So I kind of saw the writing on the wall. And that was ultimately what undid the Magazine Sound recording, was that we weren't savvy enough as business people. We were just having fun, having a good time. And the world started moving to computers, and we were going to hold on to the analog thing, and we were going to be, we were going to fight against that and be vintage.
I mean, that's still a thing to this day. I mean, a lot of studios, yours included, use like a marrying of the two, I suppose.
And that was the lesson that came out of that, was this marriage of the two. And
but you're saying it was an undoing, as if the lesson didn't come at that time.
We were resistant.
Gotcha.
To taking that lesson at that time. And part of it was trying to be as cool as Napolitano. It was like, look how cool this guy is. He doesn't care. Well, you got to care if you're running a business.
Yeah.
And so, Mike went on to do, Blind Melon Soup, and he's now married to Ani DeFranco, and he's made a huge body of work with her that's just unbelievable. His quality is on the Neville. He's the one who connected us to the Neville Brothers, because I think he played with the Neville Brothers for a while, and great guitar player, and he also connected us and me to Trina Shoemaker, who was a house engineer at Kingsway, and that was the ultimate cathedral of like analog. We're doing it the old school way. All your computers have no home here, and Trina was the high priestess, and so I fell under her spell. And learned a lot from her. And then once she got the Sheryl Crow Globe sessions, it was like, I used to know Trina Shoemaker. I'm being silly. We're still, we still keep in touch.
Sure.
But her
just
career
ascended.
Exploded.
Yeah.
And so, but she was a huge influence on me. Huge. I would say the majority of my day-to-day techniques came from her and a guy named Keith Keller.
Yeah.
And Trina's huge influence on me. But that's Mike connected us all.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Blind Melon Soup. I was just watching something yesterday. Byron Daniel from Byron Daniel and the Five Dead Dogs. It's a website you remember at NeworleansMusicians.com, and he named Blind Melon Soup as one of his top all-time favorite live recorded albums.
Yeah,
and that I've spoken with that. I wish I would speak with that more about some people. I spoke with members of another band that were I guess they were expressing their love for live albums, and I just paused because I've always found it as an ear sore. It aggravated me, and I think it's not because of the fact that it's a live recording. I just think that I'm so spoiled by studio recording, where the majority of our albums that we listen to are studio recorded albums. When you hear something recorded live, you're nitpicking. You're not in the moment. You can't be pulled into the plot.
It's never going to recreate the. We always joke about, like, you go to a concert and everybody's filming it on their phone. It's like, when are you ever going to watch that again?
Right.
And if you do, when is it ever going to, stir up the same emotional content that you had in that moment?
Sure.
Just put the thing away and watch. My brother and I were at the Grand Canyon one time, and we were sitting up on a rock, and we're watching this car go from overlook to overlook. And guy gets out, films it on his video camera, gets in his car, drives to the next one, films it on his video camera. And when he gets to us, we realize he's got his family in the car. And he gets out and he films, he gets in, the kids are trying to get out, and he yells, and it broke our heart. He yells, get back in the car, you'll see it on the video when we get home. And it was like, dude,
my God,
you have this moment right here. And so, you bring up a good point with the live. There is some magic to a live performance. There is something to that congregation of musicians playing together and the sum being greater than the parts. that is really what we're attracted to about musicians playing together, is that there's an alchemy that happens.
Sure.
That, you get this magical fifth member when all four Beatles are in the room at one time.
Dude, there's messages being sent that aren't audible
Absolutely.
or visual.
Chili Peppers are a great example,
Yeah.
or any of the true all-time great bands. They become something more than just the Neville Brothers used to do it all the time. It was like I can remember being on stage with the Neville Brothers and just being in awe of what they were conjuring. It was like they were bringing something up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And Dr. John's band used to do it too. It was just everybody concentrating on something that wasn't there made it appear.
Sure.
And going back to the thought of analog and computer hybrid, everybody was chasing the warmth of analog, but the ease of digital and the computer.
Yeah.
And what they were missing, and the computer made it where you could overdub and fix and all that stuff. But really, at its heart, the analog world required us to make the performance the thing. And the recording that you love is a capture of this performance. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's a live concert, whatever. But in the studio, generally, the recordings that are created by a band all together in a room have a quality that the recordings that you make one layer at a time don't. And so to me, the hybridization of analog and digital still kind of relies on putting musicians in a room and creating an environment where they can perform together, and I record the sum of that performance rather than the individual parts.
Okay, I could get with that. And you had lived all of these elements, but you hadn't recorded live.
No, well, that's the video stuff brought me to those live recordings. But the driver on a video job is like, so at House of Blues, we did these live from the House of Blues, I think it was promoted by Pontiac Sunbird or something like that.
Okay.
Just stuffing money in our pockets, like, from this corporate, thing. And I realized they don't really care. That was the first moment when I started to realize there's a difference between being a part of a performance and creating content. And that's when I realized this Live from the House of Blues series for TNT or something, they were just shoveling money onto us. We had this huge recording truck would come out, and same thing at Jazz Fest when I would do these live mixes for NHK, the Japanese TV station.
Okay.
It was like they're so desperate for authentic New Orleans music that they will take any performance that we give them, and it's better than nothing. We in New Orleans are so addicted to the purity of this experience that just any old show won't do. We need the good shit.
So is that the explanation for what you said prior? The difference between creating content and authentic experience? Is that the characterization?
I think that's when I realized that so much of the industry of making recordings, whether it's video or audio, I had always had this kind of North Star of, I want to capture this magical performance. I want you to feel something. We're packaging electronic signals that capture neurological responses.
Yeah.
If I can't use my electrical signals to trigger a neurological response in you, I've failed my job, right? I have to translate that emotional situation into, so as the first person sitting in front of these speakers, I better be feeling that. And you can't fake it.
Yeah.
And so that's become a driver of like being able to tell the band, no, we're not there yet, or you have to practice more, or what can we change to how do we psychologically get out of each other's way so that you can.
I mean, speaking of which, how do you reach the point where you say to yourself, all right, I think it's not me, it's them?
Yeah, that happens for sure. And there's definitely times where you are putting your finger in the Kool-Aid and you're like, I'm changing the flavor of the Kool-Aid. I need to back off.
Yeah.
And
I mean, is that the essence of a sound engineer? That's what I'm basically asking.
To me, that's starting to be the line between a producer and an engineer.
Okay.
Ultimately, an engineer is responsible for the technical side of things with whatever your ultimate, goal is. Your technical job is to reinforce that ultimate. So if I am looking for an emotional performance, I have to make the technology obey the emotional performance. If it's the analogy is better with like the captain and the pilot of a boat. The pilot knows how to drive all the systems and everything, but he might not know exactly where to go.
Okay.
The captain knows where to go, and a good captain could drive the boat too.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was my approach up the mountain, was like, if I know how to work all this stuff and work it so well that I can make it go away, and all that's left is getting the band to be in a moment and have a vibe, that's where I'm happiest. That's where I do my best.
Yeah.
Yes, the technical stuff, that's, I went so fast and so hard with that stuff so early on that it's almost second nature to me.
Well, it was funny. I was thinking about your trajectory, and I mean, you kind of started off deployed before you had the amount of training necessary to go fight in the field.
It's kind of true.
Do you know what I mean? And I guess,
and if you don't die, you're going to be a great soldier.
Well, I was about to say that's probably the best way to learn something. I mean, there are many casualties, obviously, but you survived. And I suppose that provided insight. What I'm going toward now is, I'm wondering if you could characterize the essence of an audio engineer, because it sounds like, at least from what I know and from some of what you're saying, is that there are different elements that need to be in place. You need to make the band feel at home, so you're kind of a host. And then you need to be on top of your equipment and know how to work all of these things, so you're kind of a rigger of sorts. And then you need to be able to operate it, and that's quintessential audio engineer. But on top of that, you need to be able to direct as well. I mean,
it's kind of true. And to be clear, that's where I feel like that's where the line blurs between an audio engineer and a producer, is that a producer, the lesson, the great Louis Ludwig taught me, a producer is the person ultimately responsible for turning the resources available into a recording that's more valuable than the resources that went into it. And then by valuable, fill in the blank. You want it to be worth more money, that you can sell for more money? Do you want it to be more emotionally charged than just this band in the room? Whatever your goal, whatever the driver of that is, value, your role as the producer is to shepherd this pile of stuff into a thing.
Hey, have you heard about Neworleansmusicians.com? It's a place where articles, music videos, interviews, and streaming music from Louisiana musicians can be found. Fans can join free. Music business professionals can join free too. And Louisiana musicians can join for free as well. It's also the place where Louisiana bands go to network and get free promotion. We've definitely got plenty, like this band. Check them out.
And to me, you have to have mastered at least one of the skills that goes into this pile of stuff. You either have to be a master musician, songwriter, audio engineer, or something. And then you can make that stuff just kind of go away and concentrate fully on the esoteric part of what makes a difference.
Yeah. So how do you find your place in all of that, if there is, I guess I should say, with or without a producer in the picture?
So that's ultimately, it's just like if you were a pilot on a boat and the captain is disabled, you might have to step up.
Okay, so you're well aware, if you're any good, in your capacity as an engineer, you're well aware of what the producer's role should be.
Absolutely. And if the producer is doing a great job, it makes your job easier because you can just concentrate on that, and you become a tool in their hands. You become one of the resources that they have available. If they are lacking, you have to be stronger to reinforce them. And that's where sometimes ego gets involved, and you're like, why am I doing all this stuff to make him look good? Or her look good. And it's like, that's not what the role is. That's why we have this kind of chain of command.
Sure.
And some of that stuff historically is tied to like a record label, because the record label's not going to just give a band a pile of money to make a record. They want an adult in the room.
Yeah, they need a wrangler.
Yeah, exactly. And so the producer was often the adult in the room.
Gotcha.
But, a producer is a little bit like a manager in the sense that you should be able to do all the jobs that you're in charge of, more because you should be able to step in and do those jobs if one of your team doesn't pull their weight.
Sure.
Not necessarily because you're better at all those jobs than your team.
Sure.
And I think the best producers are the ones who realize, I'm not better than anybody in this team. I'm just the one who puts it all together.
Sure.
You know.
I guess the reason I pry so much on that is because, I mean, I found myself asking, what does a producer do? I'm a fan of Rick Rubin, but I couldn't tell you.
That.
Well, right. So, and managers, and I mean, everybody supposedly has their lane, but I bring up Rick Rubin because, I don't know, everybody's like, what the hell does he do? And then other people are like, oh, he does so much. And they're like, okay, well, what exactly is that? And then to hear Rick Rubin say it, he's like the guy you were talking about before, that's Napolitano?
Oh, Napolitano, yeah.
Yeah, that's lackadaisical. That's kind of like, I don't know how to operate any of this stuff. I just be, or whatever the hell,
Yet, these amazing records come out of it.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm a fan of his, and I quit his book halfway through because I was like, I started cursing. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
You're not teaching me anything.
Yeah, it started to irritate me. I don't know.
Yeah,
so I guess that's why I pry, because those aren't clear-cut lines. Those aren't clear-cut lanes. Those are gray areas. And I'm sure some people are better at maintaining that position than others, or embodying that position. But it becomes a question to people, especially on the outside looking in, because we don't quite understand. If you were to ask me what a producer does, kind of make sure that the record comes in on budget, and
the resources turn into a record.
Right, everybody's happy at the end, so we can call it,
Well, I know I've worked with some producers who make great records and please their record company masters, and the band's not happy with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or they'll go back and the band is critical, but the fans think this is the best record you ever made, or whatever. So
sure,
it's definitely a moving target, and it's the two faces in the vase. It just depends on how you look at it.
They're both good analogies. Sure,
but like the there's many different ways to being a producer. One of the cats who taught me a lot was Keith Keller. We talked about, he was a bit more of like a Svengali. He was like a mind control kind of guy, and he would kind of Jedi mind trick you into your best performance. And his thing was like, look, Olympians don't wake up and say, oh, I better go run the 10 miles today because I'll win the gold today.
Yeah.
The Olympians train and train and train, and they say, okay, my race is on the 17th. And when the 17th shows up, they're so well trained that they're ready to go win the gold. All they have to do is push themselves to that level.
Sure.
And Keith's thing was like, musicians are coming into the studio expecting they're going to achieve peak performance on this magical day, and they're going to look at me like, why didn't you get me to put peak performance? Why didn't you capture this peak performance?
Yeah.
And Keith was like, because you didn't give me your peak performance. You didn't train enough. You weren't rehearsed enough, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so if he could psych you out to doing that, if he could distract you, hey, look over here, do this. It's like dealing with a 4-year-old. Like, don't eat your broccoli. You'll get big muscles. You don't want to have big muscles.
Yeah.
And Keith was really good at that kind of like, look, don't worry about changing the parts. Just jam it through for a minute or something.
Sure.
Or, he was one of the ones who taught me, Trina too, always be recording. And that got a lot easier as we went to the computer, because tape was expensive and ridiculous. Yeah. And so you could just get the band in the room, even if the mics weren't in the right spot or nobody was ready. If they're working out the song, Alan Toussaint used to call it the virgin take. Oh, no, save it for the virgin take. Let the first time you play it, let that magic be there with that kind of exploration of the first time you play it. And, going back to what you were saying about the audio engineering side of it is, your first job is to record. And many times I've made a recording of somebody and they go, oh man, I wish we were recording. And I go, I was. Sweet. And it's like, yeah, that's what I do.
So that's the real secret to your success. The virgin takes.
The virgin take. and just doing, it's like the bird blind. My brother's a biologist who studies birds, and he taught me that if you walk into a bunch of birds, they'll fly off. But if you sit there and you be quiet, they'll come and land, and you can watch them all day long.
Yeah.
And that's, musicians kind of work the same way. If they feel like they're being scrutinized, they start to get weird.
Yeah.
But if they feel like this is easy, it's nothing to worry about, they give you this great performance.
Sure.
So having the technical side of things ironed out first so that they can come in and just think it's easy, you generally get better stuff. Now, that said, going back to this idea of producers and different styles of producers, some, it's just like a relationship. Sometimes you need a match and sometimes you need a mate. Two of the same things don't fit together sometimes. Two different things will fit together. And so a band and a producer, sometimes they need a match. Somebody who looks and thinks just like them and can communicate to them on their level. Sometimes they need a mate. They need somebody who is what they aren't. And, I think about the two extremes of like Napolitano or Tracy Freeman, Tracy is one of those guys who, like a Rick Rubin, where you don't really think he's doing much because he's not in there like changing the chart.
Right.
But you better bet if you have a problem with your chart and everybody in the recording room can't figure it out, Tracy will step up and show you exactly what's wrong with your chart. Just because he's not asserting himself from the beginning in that conversation. He's giving you the room to work it out and figure it out. He's got an answer, but he's not forcing it in your face.
Man.
That's tough. It's a tough one because then you have the opposite of like a Phil Spector, who was notorious for like putting a gun on the table and saying, "You go record right now." Or I worked for this producer from Muscle Shoals, and he told me one time, if you get a singer and they're not crying by the end of your recording session, you haven't gotten the vocal take out of it. And I was like, that is the most absurd thing I've ever heard.
That's shitty.
I'm not going to make Irma Thomas cry just to get a great performance. She's so much better than me. Why would I do that? You know what I mean? And it's just like, that's just but some people need that. Some people think that this abusive personality is an authority, and that's the only relationship they know how to be in.
That's rough, dude.
Yeah, it's rough.
So take us back. And I'm sorry, the name of the studio on Magazine Street.
Magazine Sound Recording.
Of course.
Right.
So
super creative.
Why did y'all name it that? I can't remember that. So okay. So you don't at that time, through your own admittance, have the foresight to recognize this future marrying of digital and analog, and it spells the end of that studio, in your own words.
Yeah, yes.
So
it was that amongst other things. Mainly that we weren't savvy enough with business.
Got you.
To understand ebb and flow and cash flow and just, the responsibilities that come with running a business are kind of fundamental to anything else. But then secondarily, the computer thing. How long
were you in business for?
Did you say
went 4 or 5 years?
96 to 2000.
Okay. So 4 years. On the exit of that, where do you go?
That was not... I started, I started helping video guys, started doing a little bit of video work for audio for video, started just kind of piecemealing jobs, taking stuff where I could. I may have attempted to go back to school for a minute, and it didn't really take. And I started to try to freelance as a computer guy, specifically to help musicians. My friend Louis Ludwig and John Otan, who owns Rapidash. John was a big, important person in my life. I worked at his music store in the 90s, and he was super gracious about letting me play with the studio equipment and learning it that way, And John's somebody I look up to a lot, but also he was a great business person. Like, he understood business, and he kind of put that first. And maybe at the time I didn't quite understand that, but now I do. It's like, oh, you got to put the business first, and everything else will fall into place. But like, so those just piecing together little jobs like that to try to put together a career, trying to be a freelance, computer guy. Louis was really into MIDI production and stuff like that. So I knew MIDI really well from working with Louis, and I tried to help, George used to call it translating English to English, and I tried to help communicating the technology stuff to musicians. And at the heart, that's what I do. But this is where I was starting to understand that this was my role.
Gotcha.
And it just wasn't coming together. And so George Ortolano said, man, there's this computer store on Veterans, the computer shoppy, and he's hiring techs. And we know enough to go be computer techs.
Yeah.
And, he pays whatever, $25 an hour or something. I was like, great, let's do it. So I went, and the owner of that store, Frank, was super gracious about giving us the training we needed. So it was like he knew he could charge more for us if we had this certification.
Okay.
So he would pay for us to go get whatever certification. So it was almost like go to college for free, you know, but it wasn't legit college. It was just real training.
Yeah.
And so at one point, he found out that I knew Pro Tools, or I was learning Pro Tools and starting to learn that stuff. And he offered to pay for me to get the training materials to learn Pro Tools. And I did that, and
that was super valuable.
That was super valuable because it unlocked a lot of stuff, and the training materials for Pro Tools were expensive. They were too expensive for me to have bought on my own.
Yeah.
And literally the only thing I didn't do was go to San Francisco and take the test.
Gotcha.
But everything else I had.
Maybe it's just me on the outside looking in, but I can't help but point out how ironic it is that on the heels of one of the undoings of your studio was your attempted preservation of analog.
And here I am.
You are full-fledged into computers. Did that experience burn you that much that you really wanted to spearhead computers, or was that always an underlying interest of yours?
It was always an underlying interest. My uncle was like, he had the first Macintosh that anybody ever saw.
Gotcha.
And, we were exposed to enough computers at school, like 5th, 6th, 7th grade, that you could write BASIC or, play Moon Patrol or
I had
whatever.
the same experience,
Everybody, And so when my uncle got his Macintosh, I cut his grass for a whole summer. And in return, he gave me a Radio Shack TRS-80.
Okay.
And I think I was probably 10 or 11. And that was like hardcore coding in the sense that like the only way you could get programs for it was to go into a magazine and copy down hundreds of lines of code.
Yeah.
And my folks supported that pretty well. Like, I remember my brother and my sisters, they were a little too young to be into it, but my folks definitely supported my Radio Shack addiction. And like, I wanted the robot arm, and then I definitely got to explore all that.
That's
stuff.
hilarious.
So
Armatron. We're from the same generation,
totally.
So I know everything you're talking about. And I
Armatron.
remember the TRS-80 because I got to experience that in middle school, and we would write simple programs, a blank slate if there ever was one.
Totally.
But so that's so interesting. So you have this kind of underlying interest, and why didn't that kick in at the studio?
I ask myself that same question. I ask myself, if I indulge myself with a retrospective, like, what if?
Yeah.
Why did I even mess with music in the first place? I should have just been in on computers since I was 10.
So, I mean,
Bill Gates or whatever.
There's schools of thought, and you will have purists that say that digital corrupts music and all, these different storylines.
Oh, yeah, AI is a big conversation nowadays.
So you made it clear that you were, I guess, preserving the audio to some degree, or the quality of capturing that experience, we'll say, not even the audio.
Yeah.
Did that play a role in, I guess, conversely moving so far into computers afterwards? Because it seemed like, I don't know how long it took you to realize, but looking back now, you can say it, but maybe not on the heels of that. Maybe it didn't occur to you that, that would have been a good move to kind of marry those two.
It ultimately did. That's ultimately, by 2003, that's when I realized, oh, this is what it was. This is why I went between those two extremes.
Got you.
And that's, if I had the grace to be able to look at myself from the outside, that's probably something that would keep coming up, is that I tend to go really hard into something. Like,
that's a gift. It's a gift and a curse all in. Because I have the same affliction, we'll call it,
Totally.
But I mean, as a whole, looking back, these moves that you were making were not only necessary, but I mean, they were gifts. Ellis Marsales conversation was a gift. Being thrown into Cowboy Mouth was a gift. Having the hardships with the studio was a gift.
You're absolutely right.
All of these were gifts.
Having the opportunity to go work at the computer store.
They definitely. They kind of set parameters for you moving forward that
100%.
Would focus you.
100%, no question.
So, I mean, anybody that works with you today, all that being said, can know that you are an amalgamation of, I guess, the warmth of analog and the precision of
Well,
digital.
My tagline for this place is something along the lines of like digital heart, analog soul.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like kind of because I'm trying to advance the technologies of things like Dolby Atmos and surround sound, but I also have 60-year-old equipment and
got some tubes
80-year-old.
Yeah.
I got some tubes in here, I definitely see the value of those things, and it doesn't hurt that some of these things have magnified in value because of their rarity.
Yeah.
But that's not why I pursued them. The joke is like watch guys. There's the guys who wear the watch that signals wealth, and there's a guy who wears the same watch, but because it's a masterpiece of engineering. And he's probably an engineer who probably couldn't afford that watch the same way the wealth signaler would.
Sure.
In the end, and this I think speaks to what is at the heart of your question, it's a tool. What am I trying to build? What am I trying to do? And for me, I'm trying to recreate those experiences I had as a kid where I'm listening to music and it takes me somewhere, or it makes me feel something. It changes my mood, or isn't it weird how, like, if you're feeling blue, listening to some sad music makes you feel a little bit better? Like, you would think it kind of is the opposite, but like realizing that kind of early on, like, in high school you have a broken heart, and so you listen to blues, and all of a sudden it doesn't seem so bad, or whatever and so to me there was some kind of magic in that. There was some kind of alchemy in, like, why does music change the way I feel so much? And how do I wield this magic? How do I become a wizard who can help other people, feel this? And for me, a lot of those experiences happened between two speakers. My first job in the music business was flipping over the record for my mom, so she didn't have to stop what she was doing to flip over the record.
Sweet.
And I was probably 5 or something like that. We laugh about it every now and then, but like, I had put on a Beatles record, and In My Life came on, and I was laying with my head between, I'd move the speakers and put the speakers on either side of my head like headphones. I was laying there listening, and she says she was in the kitchen doing something, and I ran into the kitchen. I don't recall this, but I ran into the kitchen and said, "Mom, I don't want you to die." And she was like, "What is that
Where'd that
about?"
come from?
And I was listening to the song In My Life, and I guess it triggered that.
But she didn't realize
But
this.
she connected it later.
Oh, okay.
But it was like that kind of emotional response to electronic stimulus that was created by an emotional prompt.
Yeah.
And so if you can ferry that through, that's the goal. So what are you trying to build? I'm trying to build an emotional experience. And so all these things become tools. If the computer helps me do it better, if a tape deck helps me do it better, great.
Did you arrive at that questioning life at an early age like you did?
I think so.
See, that's bizarre to me. Joey Carbo of Worms out of Denham Springs talks about the same thing. I've got a bunch of reels coming out right now. We did the interview a while back, but he talks about 5 years old listening to Johnny Cash, and Johnny Cash says, "I think I'll lay right here and die."
Right.
And he starts sobbing, and someone asks him what's wrong, and he tells them nothing.
Yeah.
But he, in that moment, wanted to be able to do to others what Johnny Cash just did to him.
100%.
And it's funny that you started off this whole thought process on citing, just saying the words, "it's a tool." Because his tool was music equipment.
If I could write songs, that would be my tool. Everything has come out of me. Not, what do they say? Shoot for the stars, and you might land on the moon. Like, that's everything in my career has come from the fact that I've never been able to satisfy myself, and that feeling of writing a song. Then it was playing a song. Then it was helping other people record a song.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Helping other people get there.
Also, you're a measurable amount of respect for music. You're a custodian to some degree.
Yeah, definitely.
And
my mom's a librarian, so
you cannot taint it. So you're looking for precision instruments, whether they're new or old, analog or digital, that will not sully the mix.
That's right. Do no harm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or further, I'm looking for tools that will help advance that. So like woodworking. I love woodworking. I'm not great at it, but I love it. There's like, you watch these YouTube videos and there's this kind of saw that cuts this way. And then there's the Japanese saw that pulls this way. And,
Sure.
And it's like the cuts are different. So if you were only going to study American craftsman woodworking, you'd never use that Japanese saw.
Yeah.
But if you're really a student of woodworking, you're going to know the Japanese saw. You're going to know the African hammer. You're going to know, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It's like music, the more you know about it, it doesn't become divergent. It becomes convergent. Everything you learn about focuses in on a finer point rather than moving out further. Like the heaviest jazz musicians I know don't look at genre as different classifications of music. They just look at it as styles.
Okay.
So it's like you're playing this music with a little feel that's different. And now all of a sudden you're playing salsa music or something like, you know what I mean? It's like they don't belabor themselves with this idea that I'm playing a style. And so that was a realization with recording too. And like somebody like Napolitano had the confidence to be able to say, if I do what I do and it makes your shit sound good, cool. If it doesn't, well, you don't have to work with me. Like we weren't meant to work together.
Yeah.
I never had that confidence. I was always a people pleaser. Like,
That's a weird place to be in, man. I mean, you would call it aloof as much as you would call it on point. And, you know, what comes to mind is, we're just in this jazz realm earlier, Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk. They speak of, they'll tell you plainly, they're like, there's no wrong note.
that's right.
Which is, it's like, what?
It's the note after the note. That makes it wrong or not.
What do you think the musician that doesn't realize that is trying so hard to do is trying to find the right note and stay on it, hit it? You know what I'm saying?
Or is it just being in the moment enough that you recognize this moment has passed and moved on, and now what I do with this next moment is really what defines me, not the wrong note that just went by.
Yeah.
And I think that's more of what
You're right.
somebody like Miles or Eddie Van Halen or, you know,
Yeah.
those true masters who kind of would also advise you that you got to read the book before you throw it out. Like,
So, from the computer shop, like if we put that, I remember that sign. I'm like, what are they, a French computer shop? Is there more technology in France? So,
ye olde computer
what
shop.
do you do? Is it your moment? I got to say after there, because I don't feel like that's where you were meant to be.
No, for sure. It was. I was required to be there. Like I said, the Trent Reznor thing, and my wife. I met her there.
Oh, wow.
She had
Okay.
a store. She brought her computer in to get fixed, and you know, all the guys in the back were intimidated by a beautiful woman, and they're like, "You have to go talk to her."
Sweet. So you shoot your shot with the hot one? Okay.
It didn't work out that time, but it set the stage for
Sure.
when we did reconnect 10, 12
Story
years
of your
later.
life, though, right?
Kind of right. You
Yeah,
know, it's
yeah.
like I planted this seed and then forgot about it and came back and it was like, oh my goodness, there's a tree here. You know, and now it's got a kid. now it's got fruit.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was. I definitely think that was one of the major kind of pit stops in my life that I couldn't have picked, but it was absolutely the right thing to do at the right time. Some of the other choices I made around it, maybe not great, but you know, hindsight's 20/20.
Sure.
So what ultimately got me out of there was this realization that the owner of the store was sending me out to fix people's Pro Tools computers and billing me out at $125, $150 an hour, yet only paying me $25 an hour. And it was like, that's business.
Yeah.
There's a little heartburn from that, but I can't be mad. He was giving me work, and
You saw opportunity, not.
that's kind of more of the way.
resentment,
Yeah,
I
that's a
guess.
good way of putting it, because it was more like, well, shit, what do I need to do to have this on my own that people would trust me? It's the same people I was already working with already. Terrence Blanchard, Alan Toussaint, you know, like, why are they calling him and not me directly? And I realized I needed to kind of have more of a business structure. I needed to understand how to present yourself as a professional organization more than just a guy who can do things, you know? And so at the time, there was a guy named Roland von Kernatowski who had bought Tipitina's. And he was ramping it up, and ultimately he turned Tipitina's into a nonprofit because he was a real estate guy. And he was looking to manage the profits from his real estate stuff. And somebody told him that a bar if it's not run flawlessly, can lose money. A music club can lose money.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, great. If I made it a nonprofit, I can feed all my money into it. I can do a community service, and I don't have to pay taxes, or it gives me a tax break or whatever. And all these other great things come out of it. Let me do that. And that was, I kind of came into his orbit through like Cyril. Cyril was doing some stuff with him, and a few cats like that.
Cyril Neville.
Cyril Neville.
Yeah.
And so, he was a difficult guy to work with, but as I learned more about business and learned more about how some stuff is cut and dry, it's opposite of the way an artist thinks. An artist doesn't necessarily think black or white, and
Sure.
a business person sometimes has to.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the next great marriage of my life, was understanding how to kind of overlap business with this creative thing. What's the discipline of creative discipline? And coming out of the computer store guy, Tipitina's called. They had made this recording on Rebirth Brass Band for their 30th anniversary or something, 2002.
Okay.
2003. And they wanted to release, they made a documentary, and they wanted to release this live album that they recorded at Tipitina's. But it was done on these old DA-88 tapes, which I used to use for my live recording stuff. So I knew that stuff really well. And the guys at Tipitina's knew me from doing those live recordings. Long, boring story. The tapes, they had so much data and so many tracks of the band that they had no way to organize it on tape. And they were looking for somebody who could convert the tapes to Pro Tools so that they could do it non-linearly. They could organize this data in the computer. And Roland, God rest him, had a blank check to solve this problem. And so I saw a business opportunity. And I said, I'll jump ship and I'll come work for you, and I'll be your guy who can take on this job. And let's just start with this job. Let me convert these tapes to Pro Tools, help you organize the material you have in Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And then we'll go from there. I wasn't even going to mix it. It was somebody else was going to mix it and turn it. Well, eventually they found out that I was a capable mixer, and that not only did I know Pro Tools, I knew audio. And next thing you know, I was making Rebirth records with Tracy. And that's,
wow.
So it was like we made, I made 2 records with them in that time. This live record, and then there was one called Rebirth for Life, and that was my first taste of like recording horns and a brass band to try to get that power.
That's interesting, because that's a step out of any realm, really.
And it really was.
The
It was
character
a whole
of
new,
that instrument.
So I wanted the intensity of an electric guitar, but the clarity that brass had. And, coming up in New Orleans, we hear it a different way. We hear it, there's a fire inside of a brass band.
Yes.
That you kind of have to grow up hearing to not be mesmerized by, to keep your wits about you while you have microphones on it. Otherwise, like if you haven't grown up with it, you might get blown away, and you're like, oh, you kind of get overwhelmed. And I think there was something about that where it felt like, to me, it was riding a horse that couldn't shake me. This horse couldn't buck me.
Yeah.
And I was riding it. And the harder they got, the harder I got.
You had to, in that very moment, answer your question from when you were a child. I would suppose that might have been part of the allure.
That's why
because it was such a localized mission
Yeah.
to be on.
Yeah, and that's we had a studio on the 8th floor of the Fontainebleau. It was a well-equipped studio. I converted it to Pro Tools and he gave me a blank check for a Pro Tools rig. So I went from like reading about Pro Tools and having like a baby Pro Tools system to having the best Pro Tools system money can buy.
Wow.
Overnight. And
Yeah.
so it was like, you give me a real sword? Let's go chop some shit up, And so I just started rolling, and that was how I met Dr. John, and because Trombone Shorty was, and so I started teaching a class with it because that was one of his things, the Tipitina's Foundation, and he brought in this guy Bill Taylor, who's a great educator and a great fan of music, and Bill was like, "Man, could you teach like studio stuff?" I said, "Absolutely." And as I'm talking to him, my first class at Tipitina's Foundation, it sounds like a brag, Trombone Shorty, Chris Royal, and Jonathan Baptiste. Wow. They were in my first class, and they were doing a session with him, and I'm teaching them about recording and stuff.
This is specifically about recording on Pro Tools, or
just
the recording
in
process?
general. Yeah, the driver was like, how do we round out the musicianship? Donald Harrison, the maestro, was teaching the musician side of it. And so they put me in place to teach the production side of it. Basically.
Okay.
And so our goal was how do we round out the skill of a musician? It's one thing to have all this talent with your instrument. It's another thing to know when you go to a show that the guy on the side of the stage is doing your monitors and the guy at the front is doing your sound, so you don't go into the microphone and say, turn my mic up. You know what I mean? It just kind of undoes your professionalism if you don't know the rules.
Sure.
So that was really the fundamental of what started me teaching. And in that context, we started talking and we were doing a recording, and I said something to the effect of, like, if we were doing this for a record company, we would all sign work for hire, or we would sign a split sheet that explains how the money split up. Just shit I had seen pros do in the studio previous.
Okay.
And they kind of responded like, oh, no, we don't sign anything.
Who?
One of the students, I don't want to say which, but one of the students from that era of
Why would there
shorty
need to be a documented structure for that relationship or that?
Well, I was preparing them for the real world.
Oh, okay. So you're giving that
part
advice.
of a lesson.
Okay, this wasn't an
exactly.
actual.
Yeah. No, sorry. To be clear, we were doing a session.
Okay.
And
they say we don't sign.
And I said, in a real session, you'd be signing this paperwork. And they're like, oh, no, we don't sign anything. George Porter told us, you sign something, that's how you get screwed. Aaron Neville lost Tell It Like It Is because he signed something. And I was like, okay, stop right there. This has to be fixed. This idea that you can be a musician and never sign anything is never going to cut it. So I went to Bill and I said, dude, it's going to take a generation to fix this.
Yeah, right.
Before the instinct is, I don't record without signing something. Instead of, I don't sign anything. It's going to take a whole generation. And, like I said, Troy and JB and those guys got it. Chris Royal, they get it. They're professional musicians, But
that's a younger generation that you're speaking about, too.
Exactly. These kids were in high school in 2002, and I was 28. You know what I mean? So I was already 10 years out of high school and had a taste of the real world.
But I'm saying the people that they cited as their advisors.
A whole nother generation.
Right. So, exactly. I mean, I could see possibly where the newer generation might have been more open to receiving it, but I don't want to get in the way of the story. So it's about what you're about to say.
You're exactly right. And they realized that, oh, wow, this is the difference between $100 a gig and $10,000 a gig. That was, and having somebody like the maestro, Donald Harrison, being able to reinforce that. Oh, no, bro, that's, you don't do that or whatever. It was like, oh, I see. And so it started to put a framework around it in this idea of business. And so that ultimately matured to where when Troy blew up and became Trombone Shorty and he started his own foundation, he had me come in to teach production and music business. And for a long time, I ran the Trombone Shorty music business classes. And I still do some with the Jazz and Heritage Foundation. And it's just, that's where I kind of started to realize, like, I know enough to share this and become a teacher. I'm kind of naturally able to share information and inspire people to want to learn more, from that. And so that became part of my career at that point. But the biggest piece was I went from realizing what I was missing. When I worked at the computer store, I realized how much I missed the studio and microphones. And then when I saw that opportunity to have another studio and microphones, I jumped on it.
Yeah.
And everything else has flowed from that because because of my experience with that, the guys from the Music Shed, where they had rehearsal rooms and the construction wasn't done right. They cut some corners on the construction, whoever they had doing construction, and they were looking for somebody to come in and consult on the acoustics. So they brought me in through a friend of a friend, Eric Fletcher, brought me in to consult on the acoustics. And at one point, Eric said, I'm thinking about building a recording studio in this space. And we started building a recording studio in that space. And then Katrina happened. And Eric moved to Memphis. And the Music Shed guys said, well, do you want to build a recording studio? And then the great era of the Music Shed.
As a continuation of what you and the friend were doing originally?
No, we started that over. I started it over.
Gotcha. I mentioned earlier that you hadn't seemed to have any problems with the imposter syndrome theory. And it seems like that would be an advantage to you when moving into the space of music business, not just music, but music business.
Mm-hmm.
Did it make it, I don't want to say easier, it's too much of a simplified term. Did it make more sense to you to charge certain amounts for your services in certain capacities? How did you arrive at those? And I guess we'll keep it vague for simplicity because you did so many different things, but how were you able to justify that in your own mind and arrive at a number other than...
I'm still negotiating that. I'm still figuring that out.
Aside from the idea that you had the confidence to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people, I'm one of them, I give away everything I do for free, and people don't understand that, and neither do I, but in some respects I have such an immense amount of respect for music, and I just feel like, how could I have the audacity to charge somebody for an interview? It's kind of, there are lines that are unclear. People have shows, talent shows, and they'll charge the band to go play, and it's like, what the hell are you doing? Or music conferences where they charge people to play. It's like, it's hard to find a way in art to put a number on things because they are not, it's black and like one's black and the other's white. There's just
it's pretty crazy too, because like you have this on that same end, you have, the best New Orleans musicians. Professor Longhair would play a gig for $100. What would Professor Longhair get now if we knew, you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
And so to me, the fundamental thing about business in general is the value proposition. What do I get? What do I have to offer that's going to make somebody hand over money for it? Not only that, what can I develop in my offering that will make people fight to hand money over?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I? And so it kind of becomes a question of quality.
Yeah. Well, also qualifications, like you were about to say, because you can't just come into a room with blind ambition.
Well, that helps give people comfort. Like I always joke that the Grammys didn't really do anything for my career except made it to where I didn't have to do the cheap jobs anymore. I could just say I have enough jobs. You know what I mean? Like I had this thing I could point to that said this is. But in the end, like my dad says, it doesn't do anything. That and $1.25 will get you on a streetcar. It's not. It doesn't change anything. I'm still doing the same work I did before and after. It's just now all of a sudden, it's like I had this friend who's a Native American, and he was like, "You won the white man's game," and it's like, "Yeah, I won the white man's game." That's all it does. Is it points to this thing that says, "I can do what you think I can do," and that's what that confidence is what people are paying for sometimes. It's like if you broke your arm and you went to the doctor, and one doctor was like, "I guess I can fix it. I'll take a look. I mean, give me $100. I'll see what I can do." Or you go to another doctor who's like, "I'll fix it right now. It's going to cost you $10,000, and your arm will be as good as new." There's not even a question at that point. Fix my fucking arm. I'll figure out how to get the $10,000.
Yeah.
Right? And so how do you put that into something like art? Because it's not as critical as a broken arm, or, you know what I mean? Or
I suppose. And my question is not so much about qualifications or the representation thereof. It's more of, and I guess you would start with finding out what that person's budget is. Mm-hmm. And then I guess you would reflect upon your decades of experience in knowing what it takes to accomplish that job in man hours, I suppose.
That's exactly right. And
so you can marry the two and come up with something of a question to ask yourself, will I do X for Y? And
that's right.
That's
right. Or as I start to think of it as a producer, money becomes one of the resources. So it's like, and that's ultimately how we ended up in the studio, is that I needed a place that I could control the studio enough to be able to go to a band and, you can look at it top down and say, I'm $800 a day. but you get me with it. So it's like you hiring me for $800 and you get this killer studio for it. Or you can bring your own engineer, pay him whatever you want, and I'll give you the room for $600 a day or $500 a day or whatever. The economics don't work when you think, oh, I'm getting Finney for $200 a day or whatever. You can't think like that.
Right.
It's a package. I'm giving you, you get me and my tools. You hire a carpenter, he's going to show up with his own tools.
Yeah.
This is my tools.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I can also let my tools work with other carpenters. You know?
Sure.
But at the heart of it, it came from exactly what you're saying, where I tend to work more project-based. My dear friend and mentor, Misha Kashkashvili, who owns Esplanade Studio, he's the top of the heap right now with Esplanade. That's the best studio in town. He's, $200 an hour. He doesn't even unlock the door for less than $2,000 or something. I'm putting numbers out there. I don't know if it's true, but that's the point.
Yeah, right.
But he's also dealing with Taylor Swift and John Baptiste and the biggest of the big artists. And you kind of have that privilege when you're on that level, and you look at who's your client, the record label. They'll pay whatever to know that they have what they need. That's the confidence they're buying.
I would have less of a conscience in asking an exorbitant amount, or
From
even
a
the right
record
amount,
label?
from a label. But when it comes to face-to-face with the musicians, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't know how I'm going to pay for this, but I'm not going to charge the musician, and that's the only rule that I know.
I get it, and that's commendable. And it's, in fact, not to expose too much of our personal friendship outside of that, that's what appealed to me about what you were doing. It was like, I get it. This guy is putting the right thing first.
Yeah.
You can still do that and put money in the equation because there is a transaction. It's okay to have a transaction.
Sure.
But it's that value proposition. What am I giving you? And if people know, if your reputation and your qualification is such that I'm more concerned with a great record than I am with X amount of dollars per hour, let's talk. Let's sit down and talk about what your budget is, what you're trying to accomplish, and we'll work on a project base.
So you're saying I need to go win a Grammy?
I wouldn't advise that for anybody.
No, okay.
It doesn't
So
change
are
much.
we up to, we're not up to present day, but we're up to this location?
Almost, I guess so. If we jump past the music shed, there's probably enough to talk about with the music shed. The Katrina happened. I evacuated to Colorado.
Oh, because y'all came back and you started.
I built the studio because Eric moved to Memphis.
And this was to clarify, this was a rebuilding of the music shed, or it was
this was the birth because it was uptown. These guys bought it as a real estate play. It was a huge warehouse. It's a whole city block on Annunciation and Uterp. 50,000 square foot warehouse and building and stuff like that. And they were looking at it as a real estate play. And one of the guys who owned it was somebody I knew from the 90s, a musician, Chris Bailey. He and his wife had a band called Peabody, and they actually got signed to Atlantic, and they were on their way. Chris Bailey is one of the most wonderful minds of business and art I've ever met. He speaks exactly to what you're talking about. How do I make commerce out of art, and how do I keep the heart in commerce? And he was just kind of in on it with the real estate side of things. And one of the real estate guys said, man, the city doesn't have any rehearsal rooms. All there was is the Fontainebleau, and that's a nightmare. As Chris Robinson once told me, this place is like the seventh circle of hell, man. I was like, it's the sixth, seventh, and eighth circle of hell. But Chris was like, yeah, there's no rehearsal studios in town. We have this huge warehouse. Maybe we should look at developing it for rehearsal studios. And that's how that ball started rolling. It was Chris realizing from having been a professional musician that this is a resource that always is going to make money and is just kind of a stable way to leverage inexpensive real estate towards a profitable monthly thing.
Okay.
It doesn't flow with the summertime slowdown or
Right.
People
It's
always
not
need a
seasonal, it's
rehearsal
steady.
room. Exactly. And as they built the rehearsal rooms, more and more people asked, "Oh, well, do you have a recording studio?" And it was Ultrasonic, which is that was the Queen recording studio in town. They were the top one, and there were little smaller ones like my place on the 8th floor, or there was a place out in Bywater called Truck Farm, and there's smaller places that could do great recordings, but they weren't like full commercial studios.
Okay.
And so that started to emerge as a need, and that's how Eric Fletcherich was like, we should do a full-blown commercial studio here. But since the bills are being paid by the rehearsal room, we don't have to worry about a studio making money.
Right.
And that's always a big thing. A studio is not always a profitable venture. And so that's what started the ball rolling. I kind of got involved with them, like I said, as more of like a Band-Aid to issues they were having, and got into the conversation. And we all got along. We all had mutual appreciation, and we had a fun time together, working together. And Katrina happened. I went to Colorado, and I thought, my buddy Ben had moved to LA, and he worked with the Pixies, and his career blew up. And I was like, well, shit, maybe I should just move to LA.
You keep bringing up LA like it was in the back of your mind.
It kind of always was. It's definitely, I married a New Yorker, but I could see myself in LA as easy as anything, It's the food. It's the fish. I'm not going anywhere where there's not great food.
You don't
LA's
have to tell me
got
what
great
keeps
food,
us
man.
here, dude. It's in my blood, but I totally understand that.
Same. And so I thought about, I'd go to LA, but it would be literally starting over.
Sure.
At the bottom.
Yeah.
Even though I was confident that I would get where I wanted to be quickly, it was a financial thing too. Like, well, how do you go start over in LA with no money? I can come to New Orleans where nobody's got money, everybody's starting over, and I can be a part of something, that is meaningful as well as possibly profitable. So I came back, and I was just trying to figure out, I was helping people gut houses and just getting to work, doing stuff. And the Music Shed guys called and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this studio. Do you want to come? So I went, and I was piecemealing jobs. I did Jazz Fest that year on the Sheffield truck, and did a bunch of recordings. And I thought, maybe I'll go work for Sheffield or go do these live broadcasts. I did the legendary Bruce Springsteen Seeger session show where everybody in the audience is crying, and it was like, that was a pretty important moment. I thought, maybe this could be a thing. And the Music Shed guys called, and I said, okay, I'm all in. Let's do it. Let's build a studio from scratch. And very few things that I owned survived Katrina, but a few of them were pieces of analog equipment, microphones. And so I kind of threw that in the pile, and things just started rolling. And the thing that I appreciated about the way these guys did business is that they were savvy enough with their business skill, and they saw the bigger picture, and they would challenge me when I'd say, I want to build this. They'd be like, okay, but how does that translate into money? How can we charge more of this? How can we, how is that going to work? And they would kind of put me to task to figure that side of it out, instead of just like, here's a blank slate, start building, which has its value. But there's also a value in thinking it through and thinking, how is this going to make sense in the big picture? How do we...
Yeah, being a creative is a problem because you feel like you have found something that shows so much promise and you're elated by it. But if you watch Bar Rescue and John Taffer's on there and he's like, price per square foot. And I'm
That's
like,
right.
God, I never thought of that before. I just thought it was going to be a cool looking bar. You know?
Exactly. And that's what these guys were really good at.
Yeah.
Really good at. Chris especially. And in fact...
That's sink or swim economics, dude.
Big time. And it's like, it's not something that you are thinking about when you're in that creative mode. And so it was like putting these guardrails on my creative efforts so that you're going to get where you want to go. You just have to do it incrementally. You have to, you can't put the cart before the horse. You really have to build it the right way.
Yeah.
And you get, and so between building it the right way, doing the right things at the right time, having the right partners, and being the only recording studio in New Orleans after Katrina, everybody else was wiped out. By 2007, I was landing the biggest fish I could imagine without, I couldn't believe what I was doing. It was like, I was already doing the Dr. John stuff, Rebirth. I did a Taj Mahal record. I was doing, Warren Haynes was coming around. We did this tribute to Fats Domino for the Tipitinas Foundation.
Yeah.
And, I've got Bonnie Raitt. I've got just the heaviest of Robert Plant. It was just all of a sudden, I'm wrangling the biggest names. And at one point, I'm on a conference call with Yoko Ono. And they're asking permission to use John Lennon's recording of Ain't That a Shame for Fats Domino. I'm just thinking like, what is my life? Like, what has happened here?
Yeah.
That this is, and when she said yes, it was like, holy shit, under one condition. You have to put it first on the album. And we were like, of course, no problem. We can happily put that. You're going to, we're on a phone call with my all-time Neil Young. You can use my version of Walking to New Orleans, but it has to be first on the album. Okay. Oh shit, what do we do? It was like, now we're solving different kinds of problems.
Yeah.
Big people, big problems, little people, little problems. And so it was like, that was really like getting my master's degree or something. It's like, I've learned all this shit, but now you're really putting the chess pieces on the board. Mm-hmm. And so it was things like that were like ramping up. The Princess and the Frog came through and we did that whole thing. And all of a sudden Disney is up our ass. And we've got all these things that we have to be up to speed for Disney, and all this technical requirements that they have, and Harry Connick Jr. And it was just like the biggest of the big, what Misha's dealing with right now was what I was dealing with between 2005 and 2016. Mm-hmm. And so, that was a great lesson on, the big leagues of what was going to, and inevitably that kind of stuff burns you out. And that's where, towards the end, I was just so burned out. I couldn't maintain it at that level. And I wasn't savvy enough as a manager to know how to delegate the right things at the right time.
Yeah.
And, it just became difficult. But the cool things that came out of that there were opportunities that we could create for other people. So, like we could, rather than letting a day go empty of studio time, I could bring in a band who didn't have the funds to make a recording. And in return, we would share ownership of the recording, or we would, make a deal that when you got signed, you'd pay us back, or just whatever. We had that flexibility. We had that option, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You don't have that choice until you're fed.
Yeah.
You can't think about who you are as an artist until you've eaten and slept. So once your belly's off your backbone, you can kind of start thinking about these higher level moves. And a couple cool things came out of that. The Revivalists were one of those bands that I was able to develop in those first years. They got signed, and now they're one of the biggest bands out there. And I'm humbled to have played a small part in their career. I was joking with them fairly recently. I said something along the lines of like, "You guys used to brag about working with me. Now I brag about having worked with y'all." It's like it's the same with Trombone Shorty or whatever. And so it's like seeing that this tool. It's almost like now I can build spec houses because I've done enough carpentry. Mm-hmm. I know all the carpentry, and I see something that could really have potential. And that's that creative part that you were talking about, where I could build something and I'm not worried about the money. I'm not worried about the dollars per hour. I'm worried about building something great, and that takes all that pressure off. And I mean, you do still have to kind of have that conversation in the cold light of day.
Sure.
But those are the things that really kind of start to move the needle on the creative side of things. And you can go to somebody and say, look, just you give me the money that you have for this, and I will get you the project. And you're no longer looking at the clock. It makes a big difference.
Sure.
Yeah. And so by 2016, I was burned out, and so I had to walk away. So they bought me out, and I went and lived on a sailboat and crossed the Atlantic and lived in the Bahamas, went on a yoga ashram and stood on my head and got a dog and just kind of slowly recalibrated what it meant to be who I was instead of all the things I was trying to be.
You didn't have any more of those constraints, I would assume. I mean, you'd done enough. You'd answered enough of your own questions.
Oh, but David, there was one left.
Yeah? Okay.
There was one left.
Bring us there.
I knew there was something else for me personally.
You were still a virgin.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
That's right. I still had not seen a woman naked. There was something missing. I knew I had all these fun things to share, and I wanted someone to share it with, Mm-hmm. And I had girlfriends and stuff like that, but nothing that made me say, this is my person, And I reconnected with my now wife, who I had met in the computer store days.
Ah, okay.
And when we got together, it was instant. It was full on, and we have not been apart since. It was like we found our person.
Yeah.
And we have a baby, and he's 5, but like that was like the last piece for me.
Yeah.
And so this place was more of like I don't know if you ever studied Joseph Campbell, but the hero's journey, where you go through all these tests, you go through all these trials, you go through this transformation, and you become this thing. Then you have to go home. Harry Potter had to go back under the stairs.
Yeah.
Frodo had to go back to the Shire.
That's got to be like just the most archaic, I guess, plot or trajectory. The tarot. It's the same thing. Fundamental. When you get towards the end, you become the hermit.
Yeah. And that was my choice. Was like either become a hermit or whatever. And I was having pretty much fun with it, But I had this little studio. We renovated our house, and I had this little studio in the back of the house. And when we got pregnant, the clock started ticking on my studio in the back of the house. And so at some point, I realized she's got her nice living room that's filled with toys, and I've got my nice studio, and it really should be, this room should be a playroom, and she should have a nice.
Yeah.
And so it was like, all right, I'll start looking for a building. I'll start trying to find a building.
So that's why.
And that's what leads us here.
So that's why when we initially spoke, all I could offer you was promotional efforts, and you're like, not really looking for not trying to drum up business. Not
necessarily, but I want people to know I'm out there just as a resource, because again, I want to have that confidence that Napolitano has, that like, hey, if I have something that I can offer you and help you with it, let's do it.
Yeah.
But if what I do isn't useful to you, there's no need for us to try to force it. Even if it's dollars per hour, it's not helping me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, nobody's going to turn down dollars per hour. But I have a young guy coming up, super talented. You just need dollars for hours, and you just need somebody to sit and drive the machine. I got a guy for you. But if it's a project that we can both be passionate about, let's do it. That's what matters to me.
The passion.
And so, yeah, and if promotion means just letting people know that I'm available and let's sit down and talk about it and see if we jive, then that's what promotion is for me.
Sure.
I'm not saying I'm open for business. I cost this much money.
Here's a menu.
Yeah,
right.
That's not so appealing. I can do that. I have people, But I also like appealing to, like, if you're a producer and you've been working in your bedroom, I love the idea of saying, look, I have something that's a little bit better than a bedroom. I have an acoustic space that's correct.
Yeah.
And, I have an insane collection of equipment, vintage equipment, and I have the best Pro Tools system money can buy, and I have good speakers. And, it's like, if I can offer what I've built as a resource, a tool for other people, by all means.
So what is present day and what is on the horizon?
Really just kind of, I'm in the growth phase of getting this place stabilized enough to where I know where everything belongs. I know, it's like I'm still christening the boat in the sense of like, I haven't been out at sea enough to know I need one of these right here, right now.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? But I've been at sea enough in my life to know you can't sail without a one of these. And so I have all the one of theses I need. I may not know exactly what you need for your, Trina, one of the great things she said when REM came to record at the Music Shed, and I called her and I was like, okay, I might be a little bit over my head here. I got REM coming in. She goes, don't worry. When they leave, you'll have everything you need in your studio to record REM. Before they get there, you might not. And it was like kind of scary and kind of reassuring at the same time of like...
I was about to say you probably cursed and thanked you all in the same breath.
Well, that's what she said. She said her days at Kingsway, when they walked in, she didn't know what she needed to serve REM. But when REM walked in, they said, we need a one of these. And they went and got it. And we need a one of these. And boom, you went and got it. And when they left, you had all the things you needed. So you never had to worry about REM coming in again. That was the gem of wisdom for her. And so that's where I'm at with this place is I'm you might say I'm stress testing it. I'm trying it out on different people. I just did a record for a band called Wildcats.
Okay.
And really pleased with the way that came out. We're in the middle of working on a record for a cowboy band called Desert Nudes. And it's like old-timey Western music and amazing harmonies and stuff like that. And I work with this singer-songwriter, Jen Howard, a lot. She's tremendous talent and somebody who I'm always inspired by her effort. It's, like she's a powerful force, and getting her contained into something teaches me a lot every time that we work together. And she's somebody I get a lot of joy out of working with her. And it's things like that. It's just like, what can I put in here to find out what the limits are and see what can do. And, we're bringing the Dolby Atmos stuff online.
You mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It's, there's a couple places in town who do it, but to my knowledge, nobody has built it from the ground up. Everybody who's got it in town has retrofitted an existing space to have it.
Interesting.
This space was designed from the ground up with Dolby Atmos in mind.
Sure.
And so I'm going to start, having things to show off with it now, and probably by back to school, end of the summer, I'll have people like really working in Atmos all the time. It may be a fad, it may be the next thing, I don't know, but it's something I want to mess with. The experiences I've had with it have been awesome. It's a cool way to present music, and I love that it is not something like surround sound. When I was doing that stuff, was a byproduct of TV.
Okay.
And you had to do surround sound because it was going on TV, like the NHK and the Japanese stuff. You had to deliver in surround sound. Nobody was making a record in surround sound.
Right.
People are making records in Dolby Atmos.
Yeah.
So it's kind of turned a little bit that it's now a creative tool besides just like a new way of packaging existing music. People are creating from the ground up in Atmos.
Is it going to be, though? Is it going to be like a separate body of work, essentially? Like, when people do remixes and stuff, albums?
They're definitely starting to. And right now, Apple is rewarding people who deliver in Atmos with the front page of iTunes and stuff like that. And, they call it immersive audio. And so it's like, Kleenex and Puffs, whatever. It's all tissue.
Yeah.
And so Sony 360, there's Dolby Atmos. But the point is I think, there's two things that are missing from stopping it from being like completely widespread adoption. And the first is making it translate. When I do an Atmos mix, how do I make sure it sounds correctly in headphones?
Well, I'm thinking of streaming this whole time. And this might seem stupid, but I'm a immense Beastie Boys fan. And so I could tell when something's missing, even if it's the echo of a voice. And I'm listening to streaming and I'm like, it's not there. What the hell are they doing to this song? So that's why I asked if what product will result. Is it going to be a separate body of work? Because it won't be presentable in all mediums.
And I think that's missing. So until that moment where we can translate the Atmos mix into a stereo mix and you don't feel like you've lost anything.
Yeah.
Until that moment, it's going to be two separate things. And I'm happy for that because it means we can deliver Atmos mixes with the intent that we created this as an Atmos mix, as compared to this was a stereo mix and we adapted it to work as an Atmos mix. That always felt awkward. That always felt like, you're reinterpreting something that was already perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I have no interest in listening to another version of Paul's Boutique. It's flawless. And so I'd rather create the next Paul's Boutique in Atmos.
Yeah.
And that way, we don't worry about the compromise. It is the thing. The other thing that's missing is that right now, in order to make it work, you need to be in that controlled environment. And so I think as car manufacturers adopt it and put it into a car or something like that, that's a controlled environment. People will listen to music in Atmos in the car.
Yeah. You need the receivers.
Yeah, you need that controlled environment. But I do love that it's adaptable, and the promise of converting a full Atmos mix into a headphone mix is there. The same way when we played with our Armatron, we knew one day we're going to have a robot in our house sweeping up.
Yeah.
And might have taken 10, 20 years.
You might have. I was just like, oh, that's hilarious. Maybe you were questioning the robot's existence, but not Dave. Dave was just like, all right, what's next? That's hilarious. Well, that's awesome, man. So, dare I ask if you would like to shout out your own studio and just say that you're on the map, you're where you want to be?
One way or another, I'm on the map. Myself, Mike Mayhew, Alaric Fricky, and Jared Laurie are kind of the four ghosts that haunt the building all the time. For better or worse, it all falls on me. So I'm the captain of the ship no matter what happens. But we're called Sound From Space, soundfrom.space on the internet. And we're in Uptown near the universities, Tulane and Loyola. Everything you need, we can help you figure out how to do it. If it's, song production, to recording, to video, podcasts, whatever. I've pretty much touched all of it, but if I haven't, I'm willing to learn, and I like the challenge of finding something I haven't messed with yet. So if you got something that I haven't messed with, bring it on. Let's try it.
That's what I was about to point out. This is not for everybody to finish anything. This is more like if it piques your interest, I suppose.
Yeah.
Not in a contest sort of way, but in a way that's I guess innovative or interesting.
Yeah, and I love meeting people and talking about this stuff. And so even if you don't have a project that you want to record, or if you don't, even just reach out and let's come see the space, come hang out. And that's what I like. I like connecting with people. I like serving the community, and I know that those things do often lead to business opportunities, but first and foremost, I want to support the art.
Yeah.
And that's what drives me.
Excellent, man. It's been outstanding. Thanks for your time, man.
Dude, thanks for having me.
All right.